Zack is a construction worker. He was working in Anacortes, Washington, and he was working on the job with something called Shotcrete. It's shot in a liquid form to create these giant slabs of concrete. You've seen it along the side of freeways. A giant slab fell on top of him 16 feet and landed on the top of Zack. This could have killed him easily. It's amazing that he lived through this.
The chunk that fell and hit him was 1,000 pounds, so easily could have killed him had it hit him in the right spot. But yeah, he's fortunate to be alive.
This involves not one, not two, but three separate companies involved in this workplace injury.
When we were hired, we had to determine who are the players here and who's at fault. Each one was pointing to the other. We started with the general contractor because in Washington State, a general contractor has the ultimate responsibility to keep a job site safe.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Johnson. Welcome to the latest episode of the True Claims Podcast, brought to you by the Davis Law Group, in which we, each episode, break down a real-life personal injury claim. We talk about the laws, how they work, and sometimes how they don't work, and we talk about how compensation is arrived at, what that process looks like. It's always fascinating. We're going to bring in Chris Davis here of the Davis Law Group in just a second, but I want to tell you about this week's case a little bit. His name is Zack. Zack is a construction worker, 40 years old. He was working in Anacortes, Washington, and he was working on the job with something called Shotcrete, which is a combination of concrete and mortar. It's shot in a liquid form to create these giant slabs of concrete. It's used in swimming pools. You've seen it along the side of freeways. There might be some pictures drawn on them of whales or mountains or something like that. You get the idea. He was working with this stuff, and a giant slab fell on top of him 16 feet and landed on the top of Zack. And that's where Chris Davis and the Davis Law Group come in. This could have killed him easily. It's amazing that he lived through this.
Oh, no doubt. He was very lucky not to have been killed. Absolutely.
Talk about what happened. So he was obviously injured. What were the extent of his injuries, Chris?
Yeah, so he was knocked out and he sustained a pretty severe ankle fracture that required instrumentation and surgery. I think he had more than one surgery. And then some neck and back injuries. But he was knocked out for several minutes.
This is a fascinating case to me, just a layman in this world, that this involves not one, not two, but three separate companies involved in this workplace injury. And I guess your job when you took this case was to sort through who was at fault.
Yeah, so this is a worksite injury case, construction injury case, and they can be quite complicated because oftentimes there's more than one company involved, and the question comes down to who is at fault and why. And many times it's a combination of more than just one company. So in Zack's case, he was working for a subcontractor on a construction site that was building a retaining wall. And another subcontractor was responsible for shooting the shotcrete into the retaining wall, creating the retaining wall. And our client then was responsible for carving out that shotcrete into rock or brick facades. The other company involved was the general contractor, and the GC was in charge of the entire worksite injury. So when we were hired, we had to determine who are the players here and who's at fault.
How did you go? Where do you start? Because I'm guessing anyway, that all three companies are saying it wasn't our fault.
Right.
It was somebody else's fault.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, and it typically happens in a case like this. So each one was pointing to the other, and what we did is we started with the general contractor because in Washington State, a general contractor has the ultimate responsibility to keep a job site safe. We went through the GC's safety notes, safety meeting records. We were able to determine that the company that was in charge of spraying the shotcrete and retaining making the retaining wall did not allow sufficient time for that shotcrete to cure. And that company then allowed our client, who worked for a different subcontractor, to start his work before the cure had finalized, right? So we were able to determine that the other subcontractor in charge of the shotcrete, as well as the general contractor, for allowing that company to not avoid the curing process, were both responsible.
So how about the general contractor in this? They're in general terms responsible for the whole setup, right?
Yeah. So the general contractor was at fault, we argued, because they should not have allowed our client to begin the carving out of the Shotcrete wall until the Shotcrete had cured. So the ultimate responsibility lies with the general contractor.
Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of the True Claims Podcast. You know, one of the reasons I love doing this show is I learned so much about the legal process and how it works, and also about what goes into a successful personal injury claim. If you're like me and you're curious about some of those things, you can leave a comment down below and we might put it into our next show. For instance, if you have a question about obscure road laws or dirty tricks by the insurance industry or personal injury situations you want to discuss, leave them in the comments below. You might be a part of our next show. So you've established that they all think someone else is responsible, and then do you get all three companies involved to pay the compensation to settle this thing, or how did it play out?
Yeah, so the third company is our client's employer, and under Washington, every state's law, those remedies are dictated by workers' compensation. So our client was not allowed to sue his own employer, but we did sue the general contractor and the other subcontractor responsible for the Shotcrete.
So L&I workers' comp, I'm sure, got involved on some level, but they ended up not being on the hook. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, the workers' compensation, they only pay for certain damages, and typically they're far less than what the damages would be had we sued a third party, or the general and the subcontractor in this case. So L&I did pay out some of the medical bills and some of his wage loss. The settlement that we were able to get for him from the general contractor and the other subcontractor, we had to pay back L&I for those amounts that were paid.
What did that settlement end up looking like? Did it work out for him?
It was a decent settlement. It was over $600,000, but it was a case that we had to litigate for several months, and it looked like we were going to have to try the case. Unfortunately, both the general and the subcontractor admitted fault and finally agreed to pay.
How does it work when you talk to someone like Zack, when he first comes to you and you're looking at a complicated case like this?
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't want to build up, too much what you think you're going to get. You need to keep his expectations grounded at least.
Oh, yeah. In every case, when a client first comes to us, because the first thing that we're going to say to him or her is, we have to do more investigation before we can tell you how strong of a case or how weak of a case you have. Definitely.
Was there pictures or video or anything that helped you on this?
Oh, yeah. So we were able to get photographs showing the retaining wall, where the chunk had dislodged from that wall, where our client was when he was struck. Yeah, so those all helped.
So Zack's doing okay. I mean, listen, nasty injuries, but you think about what could have happened to his head, his back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the chunk that fell and hit him was 1,000 pounds, so easily could have killed him had it hit him in the right spot. But, yeah, he's fortunate to be alive.
How common are these workplace injuries, Chris?
Very common. Very common. We probably get, on average, maybe 2 to 3 a month.
Really?
Yeah. And typically the investigation needs to be thorough, and it usually takes time because a lot of these worksite injury cases, they will sometimes involve, 24 subcontractors. And so we have to wade through thousands of pages of medical records and find out exactly which company was at fault and then determine why.
And what would you advise someone who is injured in the workplace or knows someone has a loved one who's hurt on the job working somewhere? What should they do right away?
If the injury is serious enough, you should contact an attorney, and the attorney should commence an investigation immediately. The more time that elapses from the date of the injury to the beginning of the investigation, then the lower the success odds are for the case. And that's because a lot of evidence is either destroyed, or witnesses are lost, or memories fade. And so if we can be brought in fairly soon in a worksite injury case, the chances of success go up exponentially.
And lastly, Chris, personally, how does it feel for you? Here's a guy, Zack, a blue-collar guy, a hardworking guy doing that job out there, gets hurt. You had to feel good at the end of this case.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is one of those cases. It's a feel-good case that we were able to do a good job for him and get him a lot of money for his case, because when he came to see us, he was pretty down. I mean, he didn't know that we were able, none of us knew whether we were going to be successful. And the fact that we did, but it took several months of hard work, but the fact that we did, he was very, very happy.
Good to hear that Zack's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Very good. That's going to wrap it up for this latest episode of the True Claims Podcast, brought to you by this guy, Chris Davis, and the Davis Law Group. We'll see you next time. Eric Johnson here. I spent the last 30 years reporting on what you need to know, and now I've got something I think everyone could use. The Washington Accident Book Series offers a free legal guidebook on everything from car crashes to dog bites, so that you know what to expect after any kind of accident. Know your rights and how to avoid common mistakes after an accident by getting your free copy at WashingtonAccidentBooks.com.